We finished the AFC record division predictions. Moving on to the NFC, we're starting with the NFC East, and we are going to begin with the newly named Washington Commanders. The Commanders brought in a new quarterback taking over the helm, and that's Carson Wentz. Now, I don't expect Carson Wentz to come in and light the league on fire. I think he's going to have a decent season with receivers like Terry McLaurin at his side. He will be a little bit better than he was in Indianapolis, but I don't expect him to have this revival season like everybody else does. Defensive line did not live up to expectations, and if they want any chance of competing for the top spot in the NFC East, this defensive line, Chase Young, Montez Sweat, and Jonathan Allen, need to come in and produce the way they did 2 seasons ago. In the first 12 games, I have them winning only 5 of them. They have tough matchups against all of the NFC North opponents, and I actually have them losing every single one of those. They do have some tough matchups, so they'll win only 5 games in the beginning of their season. The second half doesn't get any easier. I only have them winning 2 more games and finishing with a 7-10 record and 4th place in the NFC East. The Philadelphia Eagles are finally going to put all these pieces that they have together and win the NFC East this season. The combination of Jalen Hurts coming into his own, I think he's going to have a big year this year. Devontae Smith is going to take that second-year jump we see a lot of offensive players make, and I think he's going to have a big year alongside A.J. Brown, who the Eagles brought in this offseason. Not to mention they still have Dallas Goedert, and they have one of the best, if not the best, offensive line in football. And with all of these weapons, I really do think Jalen Hurts is going to be able to make a big jump with those guys that he has on the outside. Not to mention on the defensive side of the football, the Eagles still have some playmakers. Darius Slade Jr., Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham. They have veterans that can make plays, so I think that all in all, this team is going to be very good this season. The Eagles will win 5 out of their first 6 games, losing to a division rival on the road. Then moving on, I again have them winning 4 out of their next 5 games, only losing to the Packers. They'll lose 2 more games and finish 13-4 atop the NFC East. Next up in our NFC East predictions, we have the New York Giants, and I honestly expect them to have a much better record than they have in years past. With all of these offensive weapons they have, you could name Saquon Barkley when he's healthy, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney if he starts to heat up like we expect him to. This offense has the potential to be very, very good. It all rests on the shoulders of Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is the biggest question mark heading into this season, and this is a big prove-it year for him. He needs to show that he can at least lead the Giants to, if not a winning record, close to it. The Giants have a pretty easy schedule this season, honestly one of the easiest in my eyes. I have them winning 6 out of their first 12 games to start the season. They're going to lose to the Cowboys at least once. They always seem to split those games. I think they'll lose to Jacksonville on the road and lose to the Packers and Ravens. Outside of that, I have them doing pretty decent in the first half of their season. They'll only win 2 more games, but they'll finish 8-9, which for their standards recently is a pretty good season. Next up in the NFC East predictions, we have the Dallas Cowboys. I have so many friends that keep telling me this Cowboys team is good enough to repeat as NFC East champions. I just don't see that to be the case. I think this team got a lot worse in the offseason, and I don't think they're going to win the division this year. Looking at the Cowboys defense, I do think it got worse. I know they still have young talent with Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs, and yes, Diggs did have 11 interceptions last year, but he also allowed the most passing yards, most air yards of any corner in the NFL. Micah Parsons, again, is the most talented player on that defense, but the loss of Randy Gregory on their defensive line is going to be huge. I think nobody's talking about that, and I think it's going to be very impactful for their defense. Amari Cooper's out the door, and I'm not saying that CeeDee Lamb can't be a number 1 option, but we do need to see him prove it to us before we can believe it. With all of their tough matchups in the first 12 games of their schedule, I have them only winning 4 of those first 12. They'll close out the season decently, winning 4 of their final 6 games and finishing with an 8-9 record. The Minnesota Vikings are finally going to get back to the playoffs for the first time in a few seasons. Hearing all offseason from Justin Jefferson that he is going to be the best wide receiver in the NFL this season, I think the combination of him, Adam Thielen, and Dalvin Cook are going to be enough to get them into the playoffs, and Jay Jets honestly might show us that he's the best receiver in the NFL if he puts up crazy numbers. Starting out the season, I have the Vikings winning 2 out of their first 3 at home against the Packers and the Lions. They have a few tough matchups against the Saints, Dolphins, and Bills, but overall in their first 12 games, I have them winning 7. In the Vikings' final 6 games, I have them winning 4 out of their final 6 and finishing with an 11-6 record, securing themselves a wildcard spot. For the winners and the kings of the NFC North, I once again have the Green Bay Packers winning the NFC North despite losing Davante Adams. As we all should know, the Green Bay Packers traded Davante Adams this offseason, and he is now with the Las Vegas Raiders. After the trade occurred, I would look at people and they would keep saying to me, because I'm a Packers fan, they would say, oh, the Packers are screwed, they're done. Without Davante Adams, your offense is going to be nothing. And I would stop them and say, hold on a second. Aaron Rodgers was one of the, if not the most talented quarterback. He was considered that before Davante Adams became the top receiver in Green Bay. Now, yes, I agree. There is nobody on the roster that is as talented as Davante Adams, and I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that Aaron Rodgers, trust me, will still be successful and will still put up good numbers without Davante Adams on the roster. I also think their defense has the potential to be top 10, maybe even top 5 this season. I have the Packers winning 8 of their first 12 games. They'll finish with a 12-5 record and win the NFC North. Next up in the NFC North predictions, we have the Detroit Lions, and last season they were close to not winning a single game, but I don't think that's going to be the case for this team this upcoming season. They added a ton of young talent in the NFL draft this season. First off, Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, you look at that kind of play, his athleticism, his aggression on the defensive line. He is a phenomenal player, and I think he's going to come in and have a Nick Bosa type impact for this defense. They also added former Alabama wide receiver Jameson Williams, who now will join the plethora of offensive weapons they have, including Amon-Ra St. Brown, DeAndre Swift, TJ Hawkinson, and DJ Chark. I only have the Lions winning 3 of their first 12 games. Don't get me wrong, I don't have this team like in the playoffs or winning the division or anything. I just think they're going to look better than they did last season. I think they'll win 3 out of their final 6 games and finish with a 6-11 record, which for their standards would show a lot of improvement and show that the young talent they have brought in is working for this team. We finished the NFC East, moving on to the NFC North, and yes, in last place, I do have the Chicago Bears. I don't see them making that many improvements. I think as a team overall, they got worse. I have them finishing in last place. You lose Allen Robinson in the offseason. That's the biggest issue I have with them. Darnell Mooney, I'm not saying he's bad. He will be a decent wide receiver 1 for them. But without Allen Robinson, you really lose a fantastic weapon on your offense. Justin Fields still has some growing to do, and the Bears' offensive line is still atrocious. That's not going to help the growth of this offense. So overall, I'm not expecting much from this team. The Bears are only going to win 2 games in their first 12 weeks, once at home against the Commanders and then once at home against the Lions. Outside of that, they have a lot of tough matchups against the Niners, the Packers, Vikings, Patriots, Cowboys, Dolphins, some toss-up games with the Falcons and Jets that I think they'll lose, so overall, not a great start in the first 12 weeks. They'll lose their final 5 games and finish with an abysmal 2-15 record. Next up is the NFC South, and we have the Atlanta Falcons, and this team will 100% finish last place in the division. Outside of Kyle Pitts, you can really see the lack of offensive talent. They lost Calvin Ridley to the suspension. They lost Russell Gage to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Matt Ryan is no longer their quarterback. So I just don't see the offense being able to produce that much during the season. You see all of these top-tier teams the Falcons have to play in the beginning of their season. They start off with the Saints and the Rams. They face the 49ers at home, the Buccaneers and the Bengals on the road, as well as the Los Angeles Chargers. I just see too many tough games in here for them to string together a lot of wins. They have 5 games in their final 6 weeks, and I have them losing every single one of them and finishing with a 2-15 record in last place in the NFC South. Next up in the NFC South, we have the Carolina Panthers, and to me, they're very interesting this year due to the fact that they have both Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold competing for the starting quarterback job. After trading for Baker Mayfield, the Panthers now have the number 1 and number 3 overall picks from the 2018 NFL Draft. The offense for the Panthers could be interesting when you couple together either Baker and Darnold with McCaffrey if he's healthy, plus DJ Moore. It could make for a pretty decent offense. My thing is, though, this defense is going to be extremely good this season. Between the young talent of Jeremy Chin, J.C. Horn, and Brian Burns coming off the edge, I really think this defense is filled with young playmakers that are going to spark them to a decent record this season. The Panthers winning 3 of their first 4 games, then losing 3 in a row to the Niners, Rams, and Buccaneers. They also have a few more tough games against the Bengals and Ravens. Overall, though, I have them winning 5 out of their first 12. They'll pick up 2 more wins to close out their season and finish with a 7-10 record and miss the playoffs once again. Buccaneers are not going to win the NFC South this season. They've experienced a lot of change and shifting with their roster and their team in general. I do expect them to still be a good and formidable team, but I don't think they're going to win the division. To start off, you lose Rob Gronkowski to retirement, and yes, I know there's a chance he might come back, but we can't bank on that, so for now, he's gone. Chris Godwin, he is going to return week 1, but he's coming off an ACL tear. We don't know how that's going to affect him. Not to mention on your offensive line, your starting center, Ryan Jansen's going to be out for, I believe it's like around 4 to 5 weeks, what they're saying right now, because of an injury during training camp, and you also lost Alex Kappa to the Bengals, so your offensive line has gotten worse in more ways than one. With all that being said, you still have Tom Brady, so I can't count them out. They still have Mike Evans, who is one of the best receivers in the NFL. They're still going to be a good team. Not to mention they added Julio Jones and Russell Gage, so I'm not saying they're going to be bad by any means. They'll get off to a good start, winning 7 of their first 10 games. They'll win 4 out of their final 6 games and finish with a 12-5 record. The New Orleans Saints are going to contend for a Super Bowl next season, and yet I've heard nobody talking about this team. Let's start on the offensive end and talk about all the weapons they have. First off, they have Alvin Kamara, who's one of the best dual-threat running backs in the NFL. Michael Thomas is coming back from his injury and is finally going to give Jameis Winston another much-needed weapon on the offensive side of the ball. Marquez Callaway really stepped up in Michael Thomas's absence and showed us that he can be a true top receiver for the New Orleans Saints, and I expect him to do the same thing this season. All of that wasn't enough. They drafted Chris Olave, who I think was the best wide receiver in last year's draft class coming out of Ohio State. He's going to be a monster for them. This offense is going to be scary next year. Oh, and also not to mention DeMario Davis, Cameron Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore, Tyrann Mathieu, and they added Kiko Alonso. The defense is going to be scary too. In the first 12 weeks, they'll start out really strong, winning 9 of their first 12. They'll win 4 more games and finish 13-4 atop of the NFC South. The Seattle Seahawks are going to be the first team since the Detroit Lions to not win a single game during an NFL season. Yeah, you heard me right. I have the Seattle Seahawks going 0-17 and not winning a single game this upcoming season. And the main reason behind this claim is this guy right here, Drew Lock, the new quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks. I just don't think he's going to be able to lead this team whatsoever. I know they have Metcalf. I know they have Lockett. I know they have Noah Fant, but they no longer have Chris Carson. Drew Lock is not going to be able to do anything offensively with this team. Their defense is lackluster. I am expecting nothing good from this Seattle Seahawks team. I have them losing to all of their division rivals. Again, we're going to look at the schedule, even though we already know it's all losses. I have them losing games to the Lions and the Falcons, which are kind of debatable, but they'll lose those games. And yes, I have them even losing to the Jets at home and the Panthers at home, finishing with an 0-17 record, making history for the first time since the Detroit Lions. I don't know what it is, but I just foresee the Cardinals having an extreme down year this season. I know D-Hop has been with the Cardinals for over a year, but just because he's been there doesn't mean that him and Kyler have the greatest connection in the world. And him being suspended for the first 6 games of the season is not going to help them build that. Not to mention, I think their coach, Cliff Kingsbury, we should all be able to agree on this. He is extremely average, if not below average. He fails to get the Cardinals big-time wins late in the season against tough competition, and I just don't believe in Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury to get it done this season. Kyler always seems to be dominant in the beginning of the season, looking like an MVP candidate, and then kind of falls off towards the end of the season. I think him getting his money is not going to help that, and while I'm all for people getting their money, this big contract I think will make him a little bit complacent. I have them losing their first 5 games and only winning 2 out of their first 12. They'll win 3 more and finish with an atrocious 5-12 record and miss the playoffs. I think the 49ers are one of the biggest hit-or-miss teams in the NFC as a whole this season. The biggest question mark they have is their new quarterback, Trey Lance. Lance has all the requisite weapons he needs. He has a decent run game along with Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and Deebo Samuel. He also has the best offensive lineman in the NFL in Trent Williams and a decent O-line at that along with a good defense. The 49ers traded up at number 3 to get Trey Lance. They've given him the keys to this offense, and now it's time for Lance to drive the bus and show the Niners and everyone why he was worth taking with the number 3 overall pick. Starting out, their schedule isn't terrible. I do have them winning 5 out of their first 6 games, with their only loss being to the Broncos on the road. After winning 5 of their first 6 games, I have them losing 4 out of their next 5, with tough games against the Chiefs, Rams, Chargers, and the Saints. They'll split their final 6 games and finish with a 9-8 record and sneak in as the 7th seed in the NFC playoffs. Going into this season, I think the Los Angeles Rams are going to have an even better regular season than they did the year prior. The connection that Stafford and Cooper Kupp have already developed is going to transition into this season very nicely. They're already going to be comfortable with each other, and I think they can have a very similar season. Maybe not in terms of the numbers and the stats, but in terms of how good their connection is going to be, I don't think there's going to be a drop-off. Allen Robinson joined the Rams this offseason, and yeah, I know his stats were not great last season, but he was in a terrible situation with the Chicago Bears. I fully expect Robinson to come into LA and have a massive, massive impact on their offense. Bobby Wagner also joins the party along with Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd, and Ramsey on the defensive side of the football. The Rams added a good amount of talent to a team that was already pretty stacked and just won the Super Bowl, so that should scare a lot of teams in the NFC. The Rams start out with a bang with a win over the Bills in Week 1, and I have them winning 10 of their first 11 games. They'll lose 1 more game, finish 15-2 atop the NFC.